Hello and welcome once again to the Cultural Cybersecurity Life Skills program of short presentations. This one is on password management. Now, generally speaking, passwords are critically important. They're the very first line of defense, and everybody knows that. And yet we still don't do the right thing. So that's what we're going to talk about very quickly. Logically, the stronger the password, the lower the chances are that it will be hacked. And what's the conventional wisdom? Although, as we'll see in the next minute or two, not everybody agrees on everything related to passwords, but generally speaking, the conventional wisdom is that we need to have a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, and longer is better than shorter. So what's the main problem with passwords? Well, of course, it's the trade-off between usability and security. More complex passwords, hey, they're great, they're more secure, but they're hard to remember, they're harder to use. Simple, easy passwords, using the same password on multiple sites, makes it easier to use, easier to remember, but of course, it is much less secure. Now, according to the provider of the LastPass password manager, they did a report and did it a couple of years apart. And the most recent one suggested 80% of hacking related breaches are still linked to compromised, weak, and reused passwords. In that same report, they suggested that 53% of people have not reported having not changed their passwords in the last 12 months. 91% no. Using the same password for the same account is not the right thing to do. And yet 60%, was that 59%, mostly or always use the same password multiple times on multiple sites and continue to use it until they are forced to change. Now, why do we do this? Once again, like I said previously, it's the trade-off between security and ease of use. Most of us are worried about trying to remember the 5, 10, 15, 20 different passwords, and then we have to go through the whole recovery process. And in this particular study, 61% of people said that was why they did what they did, and 50% of them said it was because they wanted to be aware of their passwords. Now, in case you're a little suspicious of data that comes from LastPass, which is trying to get people to use their LastPass software, it's very similar to a study that we ran last year looking at some of our clients in cultural cybersecurity. We looked at 10 organizations in Australia, over 350 employees, and very similar to the LastPass data. 66% of the people we interviewed said that they knew what a password manager was. 99% said they knew what a strong password was in terms of capitals and letters and longer passphrases, and we'll talk about all that in a little while. But 77% of them said they use the same password on more than one site. When asked to rate how frequently they change their passwords on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being weekly, 1 or 2 being hardly ever, the average was only a 4 out of 10. 10% actually said that there was information on their social media accounts that could help a cyber criminal figure out what their passwords were. And almost 70% said that they would use a password manager if they were given access to it. So look, it's a real problem. Now, what's password worst practice in terms of what should you not do in terms of password management? Well, according to MSN, the number one most common password is password, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I looked at a couple of other sites. This one is also a password manager, NordPass. They said the most common passwords are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, QWERTY, and password. So password and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are always up there. I looked at 4 or 5 different studies, and it's always up there in the top 10. So look, password worst practice, obviously don't use any of these. Password best practice, well, of course, use a strong password wherever possible. The more complicated, the better. Use a unique password for every single account. I know that's difficult. Tough luck. Don't store your passwords, obviously, on your computer or on stick-it notes, where people can see them. And unfortunately, you're going to have to change them on a regular basis. I know it's difficult. I know they're hard to remember. There are a couple of things you can do. And we'll talk about them in a moment. Now, one of the more obvious things that people suggest doing is using a password manager. Now, there are some strong pros, but there's also some strong cons for using a password manager. The most serious negative is that more than a dozen password managers are known to have been breached since 2016. I've got the list. There's 13 or 14 on my list. Now, of course, I'm not going to put it up here for legal reasons. It's not my job to say, pro or con any kind of software or organization. But look, just do your own research. There's a lot of people who are terrified because they don't want all their passwords in one place and then have the password manager hacked. But look, on the plus side, the suggested benefits are increased security. There was a study that was done that suggested that people who didn't use password managers or didn't use them properly were much more likely to get hacked than people who did use password managers and use them properly. Obviously, they're suggested to be more convenient, and they help you stay access and help you change them and give them, you're more organized that way. So look, you have to do your own research on this and make your own decisions. What can you definitely do? Well, what we suggest is always use a passphrase wherever possible. And of course, enable multi-factor authentication, which helps you not just with your passwords, but with security in general. I know multi-factor authentication, MFA, some people find that difficult. Once again, tough luck. When you're going to use your credit card online, it sends you a code to your phone, et cetera, et cetera. It just makes great sense when you want to get money into or out of a bank account. Your partner, your business partner, your life partner, your wife, your husband, your friend, your boyfriend, your non-gendered being friend has to go in there and agree to it as well. I mean, it just makes so much sense to use MFA. But the problem with passphrases is that not all sites or applications will actually let you use a passphrase. Some require a 5-character, a 6-character, an 8-character password. Some require one capital and one character, or one capital, one character, or one number, etc. And so you're limited. But look, wherever possible, use a phrase that makes sense to you because it's harder to crack and easier to remember. The sun always shines on Thursdays. I like to drink water and beer every night. Whatever it is that's a phrase for you, and you have a phrase that makes sense given the context, so you can remember 3 or 4 or 5 phrases, and they're much harder to crack and much easier to remember than Q22TX, even if you put a capital or a lowercase letter in there. So look, there's not a lot more to password management than this. You can make it incredibly complicated. There's not a lot of agreement. I've done research for the last couple of weeks on this. I've gone through the academic literature. There's contradictions, there's pros and cons. What we've tried to do here is give you the shortest, the sharpest, the most basic. And remember, as always, information security is not just up to IT. Don't just leave it to the virus protection software. They do a great job in IT. Virus protection works, but 95 to 97% of breaches have to do with people and organizational culture and bad password management, and only 3 to 5% of breaches are because of technical failures. So it's up to you and me, ladies and gentlemen. So look, if you have any questions, comments, send me an email, jcarlopio@culturalcybersecurity.com. Give me a ring if you're here in Australia. If you're not here in Australia, cross off the 0 and add +61 or whatever you need to do to get to me, or go to our website, www.culturalcybersecurity.com. Be well, be happy, be safe.